Hi there and welcome to the channel of A Disappointed Man with me, Jason Kennedy, the Disappointed Man. And in this video, I'll be speaking about this book, Robertson Davies' Fifth Business from 1970. Now, when I picked this up, I knew nothing at all about Robertson Davies. I've since learned that he was one of the major figures in 20th century Canadian literature. Born into a wealthy and influential family, he enjoyed a stellar education and he later distinguished himself in a number of fields, including as a newspaper editor, as the master of a college he founded, and of course as a novelist. And it was this book, Fifth Business, which cemented his literary reputation. Now, what distinguishes Fifth Business from most other novels is its use of the philosophy of Carl Jung. Each of the three principal characters corresponds to a Jungian archetype. So we have Dunstan Ramsay, the narrator, who is the seeker, Percy Boyd Staunton, the lover, and Paul Dempster, the magician. Now, the only other author I've read who also makes explicit use of these archetypes is Hermann Hesse, and Fifth Business strongly reminded me of Hesse's novel Demian. So I went back and reread Demian, and there are indeed some striking similarities. In both books, the narrator worships the mother of another character. In both books, we see how stronger personalities can promote or retard the development of weaker personalities. And in both of them, we also see how one's personal development doesn't end by reaching adulthood, but is a lifelong process few people actually manage to complete. Now, Fifth Business is a far more intricate work of art than Demian, and there are two principal reasons for this. Firstly, the difference in scope. Demian only covers around 10 years in the life of its narrator, Emile Sinclair, whereas Fifth Business covers 70 years, the entire life of its narrator, Dunstan Ramsay. And the second difference is the rhetorical structure of these works. If you study the opening to Demian, no indication is given of who the narrator is addressing or for what purpose, whereas Fifth Business has a fictional narrator, Dunstan Ramsay, and a fictional narratee, the current headmaster of the school, where Ramsay was a master for over 45 years, and his purpose is to correct what has been written in the college newspaper to commemorate his recent retirement, as he writes. I offer you such a statement as this because I was deeply offended by the idiotic piece that appeared in the College Chronicle in the issue of Midsummer 1969. It is not merely its illiteracy of tone that disgusts me, though I think the quarterly publication of a famous Canadian school ought to do better, but its presentation to the public of a portrait of myself as a typical old schoolmaster doddering into retirement with tears in his eyes and a drop hanging from his nose. What the rhetorical structure of Fifth Business does is place us, the reader, in a very different position to the reader of Demian, where one feels the narrator is addressing us directly. In Fifth Business, we are instead overhearing a communication that was not intended for us, and at any moment we can place ourselves in the position of Ramsay or the headmaster reading the communication, and that generates a number of intriguing questions. The first of which is this: if the ostensible purpose of Ramsay is to correct the misrepresentation of his career as a schoolmaster, why does he begin his statement with the throwing of a snowball when he was only 10 years old? So, from the very opening pages of this novel, there is a huge question mark concerning the true purpose of the narrator, and that lends the narrative a very pleasing air of mystery. But rather than supply any ready answers, Davies instead launches into a very finely written Bildungsroman, which traces the consequences of the snowball incident as we follow the lives of these three boys into adulthood. And we are deep into the narrative when suddenly there is an astonishing surprise, because we learn that what we've been reading is both wholly truthful and deeply deceptive. The purpose has been to lure the fictional narratee and us, the reader, into a wholly misleading picture of the narrator that corresponds quite closely, actually, with the dusty schoolmaster figure of the College Chronicle article. This bold and wholly unexpected move by Davies is linked with Jungian philosophy. In effect, deep into middle age, the narrator suddenly realizes at the prompting of another character that he is not the person who he and we, the reader, have taken him to be. He has so allowed the seeker archetype to dominate his personality that he has not been able to give expression to the lover and the magician within himself. He has instead lived through others. The lover through the salacious stories of Percy Boyd Staunton, and the magician through the performances of Paul Dempster. And at this point, two things happen. Firstly, there is a doubling back. So we have to think over what we've already read and realize it could have a completely different meaning. And this makes this novel feel much, much longer than its brief 300 pages. And secondly, now that Dunstan Ramsay resolves to give expression finally to the lover and the magician, we are launched onto a fantastical concluding section which will stretch our credulity to breaking point. To fully embrace the concluding section of this narrative, we, the reader, must embrace the principles of Jungian philosophy itself, which posits the existence of forces beyond our conscious control, which are capable of generating coincidences and moments of synchronicity, which will complete the design of the novel. And all of this leads to a fateful encounter when the three men are reunited for one evening only back in their childhood village of Deptford. And finally, the true significance of the snowball incident is revealed. So there you have it. And I'd just like to make two final points as a reader. The first of them is the guilty pleasure I got from reading Fifth Business, much as I do with the work of Hermann Hesse. That is, when I'm not reading the book, I will think to myself, oh, this is so preposterous. This is so ridiculous. This is so ludicrous. How can I read this stuff? And then when I open its pages, it suddenly begins exerting this fascination for me. So that is something I don't usually find with much literature. And there's a second thing I don't find with many books, and that is, like Hesse, this really does continue to work on you well after you've read it. For weeks afterwards, I kept going back through various points of the story and taking more and more from this novel. So that is a very praiseworthy aspect of having read this. Finally, I usually say, well, I strongly recommend this. Go out and find a copy. But with a Jungian novel like this, maybe you can just sit back and the universe will bring it to your door. That's all for now. By way of farewell, I will repeat my mantra. Be safe, be strong, and I shall see you anon. Nanu nanu.